The announcement lasted less than 60 seconds, yet its reverberations echoed to the corridors of the royal household like a sudden thunderclap. Inside a private drawing room at the palace, King Charles gathered the most senior members of the royal family for what was supposed to be a routine family update. However, the atmosphere shifted drastically the moment the king spoke. He officially confirmed that Princess Charlotte would be awarded the Rose of Wales, a deeply private and highly exclusive royal honor originally instituted in cherished memory of the late Princess Diana. This distinction was never meant for ordinary royal duties. It was specifically reserved for the young woman deemed most capable of carrying forward Diana's unmatched legacy of compassion, empathy, and personal sacrifice. Upon hearing the decree, Princess Charlotte lowered her head in stunned silence, clearly overwhelmed by the magnitude of what she was being handed. Prince William visibly struggled to contain his emotions, fighting back tears as memories of his mother flooded his mind. But across the room, Queen Camilla's reaction was starkly different. Her expression instantly hardened, her eyes widening in disbelief as she realized the massive historical and public implications of such an act. Charlotte had walked into that room believing she was merely attending a briefing to observe future royal responsibilities alongside her mother, Catherine, while William stood quietly near the king. She had no idea that every single word uttered by the monarch had been carefully drafted specifically for her. The Rose of Wales is an extraordinary ceremonial distinction created shortly after Diana's tragic passing. It was intended to symbolize courage, deep human connection, and selfless service to forgotten. For decades, King Charles had fiercely protected this honor, keeping it locked away because he firmly believed its recipient had to truly understand personal pain without being consumed by it. When the king declared that Charlotte would become the very first person in history to wear and represent Diana's reserved honor, everyone in the room understood the sheer weight of the moment. Charlotte was assigned a lifelong duty to support grieving children, aid homeless families, and comfort individuals who felt completely invisible to society. It did not elevate her formal royal rank, but it placed upon her young shoulders a permanent burden of public service tied directly to Diana's revered name. Instead of looking at the king first, Charlotte turned her eyes toward her father. William tried to utter words of reassurance, but his voice failed him. He walked across the polished floor, stepped toward his daughter, and placed both hands firmly on her shoulders. In that fleeting, emotional second, the future king ceased to be a formal royal figure. He was simply a grieving son remembering his late mother while watching his beloved daughter inherit her unfinished life's work. Meanwhile, Camilla remained seated, visibly rigid. She had long believed that Diana's honors would remain purely symbolic and safely confined to history books, knowing that any prominent resurgence of Diana's memory would inevitably invite unflattering public comparisons with herself. Her disbelief turned into deep concern when Charles further explained that Charlotte would officially wear the silver rose insignia during major national ceremonies. Camilla glanced toward Catherine and noticed something even more troubling. Catherine did not look surprised at all. The Princess of Wales was already intimately familiar with the exact wording of the decree, meaning she and Charles had held private consultations long before this meeting. A major royal decision had been orchestrated right under the Queen's nose without her knowledge or input. When the king opened a velvet presentation case to reveal the delicate silver rose insignia, originally designed for Diana, Charlotte reached out her hand, hesitating just inches away from the velvet. Camilla finally spoke up, her voice sharp, asking whether this monumental decision was absolutely final. King Charles turned, looked directly into her eyes, and confirmed without hesitation that the decision was complete and irreversible. Immediately following the emotional gathering, Queen Camilla retreated to her private apartments without summoning an aide, leaving her gloves resting on the table as a quiet reflection of her inner turmoil. She had spent years building a secure position within the royal institution, yet this single unexpected honor reopened the painful public comparisons she had fought so long to overcome. Diana was no longer just a shadow from the past. Her moral authority had now been officially woven into the crown's next generation through Princess Charlotte. Unbeknownst to Camilla at that moment, the true catalyst behind this decision had taken root 6 months earlier during an unannounced royal visit to the Diana Children's Bereavement Center, an organization dedicated to supporting young children who had lost a parent. King Charles had held on to the Rose of Wales insignia for decades, fearing that bestowing it too casually would reduce Diana's genuine humanitarian legacy into a meaningless ceremonial gimmick. However, an unexpected encounter with an 11-year-old boy named Samuel changed everything. Deeply traumatized by his mother's recent passing, Samuel became overwhelmed by the surrounding officials and suddenly turned away, refusing to speak to the king or respond to Catherine's gentle, encouraging words. As aides prepared to move the official party forward to keep the schedule on track, Charlotte made a choice of her own. She quietly slipped away from the royal line, walked over to Samuel, and sat down on the floor a few feet away from him without making demands or forcing physical contact. She simply waited in quiet solidarity. When Samuel finally broke his silence and asked Charlotte if she ever missed someone she had never actually met, the young princess offered an answer that shattered all formal protocol. She gently confessed that she deeply missed her grandmother Diana through the visible sadness she often saw in her father's eyes. Touched by her raw honesty, Samuel reached into his pocket and handed Charlotte a small paper rose he had handcrafted in memory of his mother. Charlotte folded her fingers around the paper flower and quietly promised to protect his story. Watching from a distance, King Charles recognized the exact same quiet restraint and genuine empathy that Diana had once displayed when comforting a hurting soul. That very evening, the king opened his private desk drawer, placed Samuel's paper rose next to Diana's and used silver insignia, and penned Charlotte's name on the royal warrant. When Camilla eventually discovered the paper rose alongside the silver warrant inside the king's private study, the realization that Charles had acted completely without her knowledge sparked an intense, closed-door confrontation. Armed with official briefings, Camilla demanded to know why she had been excluded from a decision that would inevitably revive public hostility toward her. She argued that elevating Charlotte in this manner would signal to the world that Diana remained the true moral heart of the monarchy, while the current queen was merely tolerated. King Charles, however, stood his ground with uncompromising firmness. He declared that he would not diminish his granddaughter's genuine calling merely to shield adults from uncomfortable historical truths, admitting that while the palace had failed Diana in life, he would not silence her compassionate influence in death. Refusing to accept defeat, Camilla shifted her efforts to the formal royal council, where the legal responsibilities and ceremonial language of the warrant had to be officially ratified. Seeking to neutralize the emotional weight of the award, she formally proposed altering the text to remove any direct mention of Diana, suggesting instead that Charlotte be named a generic representative for youth service. As tension mounted during the council review, Princess and carefully read the proposed revisions twice before setting her pen down in silence. The Princess Royal confronted the room with a razor-sharp question, asking whether the palace was truly seeking to honor Charlotte's genuine virtues or simply trying to hide behind fear, and then brought forth an archived personal note written by Diana shortly before her death, in which the late princess expressed her wish that any future service honor created in her name should never go to the most glamorous figure, but to the one capable of entering a painful room and making suffering people feel truly seen. With Anne's decisive backing, alongside strong votes from William and Catherine, the king officially sealed the warrant without modifying a single word. The fallout from the council's unyielding decision became visible not through a public statement or an official dispute, but through a cold, empty chair during the private rehearsal for Charlotte's investiture ceremony. As King Charles, Prince William, Catherine, and Princess Charlotte gathered inside the ceremonial hall, Queen Camilla's assigned seat remained noticeably unoccupied long past the scheduled start time. Catherine quietly adjusted her daughter's collar, while William stared straight ahead in tense silence, fully aware of what the absence signaled. Moments later, a formal message arrived stating that the Queen would not be attending the rehearsal. While official channels cited minor illness, everyone inside the room understood the truth. Camilla was deeply unsettled by the permanent inclusion of Diana's legacy in the royal warrant and felt completely alienated by a decision that seemed to place Diana's memory above the institution she had worked for decades to support. Sensing the mounting friction within her family, 8-year-old Princess Charlotte experienced a moment of profound vulnerability. Deeply saddened by the thought of being the cause of division between her grandfather and step-grandmother, she privately told Catherine that she was entirely willing to surrender the Rose of Wales' honor if it meant restoring peace within the family. However, Catherine responded with unwavering clarity, teaching her daughter that true compassion must never force anyone to hide or step down out of fear. She explained that if Charlotte abandoned the duty of service simply because someone else felt threatened by its history, it would contradict every principle of empathy that the award was meant to represent. Encouraged by her mother's strength, Charlotte made a courageous choice of her own. She requested a private, one-on-one meeting with Queen Camilla, insisting on speaking to her alone without parents, advisors, or protocol officers present. When Charlotte walked into the Queen's private sitting room, she brought no prepared speeches or formal royal demands. Instead, she carried only Samuel's handcrafted paper malar flower and placed it gently on the coffee table between them. With striking simplicity, the young princess looked Camilla in the eyes and apologized for the distress the announcement had caused, explaining that she never wanted her grandmother Diana's memory to be used as a weapon to make Camilla feel excluded or forgotten. Dismantled by the child's pure sincerity, Camilla's defensive barrier collapsed. For the first time, she saw that Charlotte was not acting as a pawn in a palace power struggle, but was genuinely trying to build a bridge between a painful past and a hopeful future. Touched by Charlotte's emotional maturity, Camilla picked up the paper malar, handed it back, and promised that she would proudly attend the investiture ceremony by her side. The following morning, as sunrise illuminated the gates of St. James's Palace, massive crowds gathered outside holding white roses, vintage portraits of Diana, and handwritten signs of encouragement. The national media broadcasted live coverage as royal vehicles arrived, but the single image that captured the entire nation's attention was Queen Camilla stepping out of the car alongside Princess Charlotte, gently placing a supportive hand on the young princess's back as they walked up the palace steps together. Inside the packed hall, surrounded by representatives from children's grief charities, homelessness initiatives, and community organizations, King Charles officially presented Princess Charlotte with the Silver Rose of Wales insignia. Departing from his formal script, the king emotionally declared that Charlotte was receiving this honor not because of her royal bloodline, but because she possessed a rare gift of truly listening to hurting people when everyone else was ready to move on. Charlotte then stepped forward to deliver her personal pledge, promising that the Rose of Wales would forever serve as an instrument of healing, dignity, and quiet comfort for those who feel unseen, rather than a symbol of past family conflict. Queen Camilla was the very first person in the hall to rise and initiate a resounding standing ovation, followed immediately by William, Catherine, and the entire assembly. Later that evening, in a private gathering inside the king's study, Charlotte placed Samuel's paper malar permanently inside the velvet presentation case next to Diana's silver insignia. What had begun as an unfinished, painful promise in the past had finally transformed into a living legacy of reconciliation. Through Charlotte's innocence and empathy, Princess Diana's memory was no longer a source of division within the monarchy, but a timeless beacon of mercy uniting generations to come.